evening, everyone. For tonight's podcast, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm sharing a live that I did a couple of years ago on traveling safely with dogs, which actually is a health and wellness issue, as you will find out. And too often I see people traveling with dogs that are not restrained. And there's the age-old debate, what is safer, harnesses or crates? And the answer is really, well, both or neither, as you will see from this. If you want to actually see the slides involved, I'll link this in the show notes. You can actually see the slides. But otherwise, I hope you find the podcast useful. As always, if you've got any questions, comment below. For those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Dr. Helene. I'm an emergency medicine doctor and also a certified animal aromatherapy specialist, and I love to help people with an integrative approach to their health and that of their pets. So if you like what you're listening to, please hit the follow or the subscribe button and let me know what you want to learn about. And if you want to get essential oils into your life, then check out my store, find out about my kits or my consultations, or feel free to contact me to find out a bit more about how I can help you. I hope you enjoy the show. I'm hoping we are live. I believe we are. I'm just checking on my phone to check. Otherwise, I won't be. Yeah, I am. Fantastic. Awesome. So welcome everyone to my live on traveling safely with dogs. My name is Helene. And I just want to start this off by saying and reiterating again, I'm not affiliated with any company. This is just a live to help you make an informed decision about how best to sort of work out what you need for your car, your van, and make an informed decision. And I'll be looking at the pros and cons of sort of crates and harnesses, and there's no one that's actually better. And you know, this is often a mistake that I see people saying, you know, one-on-one group. So I'm not affiliated with anyone. I'd really love to hear your comments, post pictures of your dogs, please do. Any businesses that are, or anyone sharing a business name about a crate or a harness will have their comment deleted, just because I want to make sure this is completely neutral and that there is no affiliation with there at all. So let me I'm going to just start. Actually, I should go back. I just want to check that my screen shares okay, because you know what things are like. So I'm going to start sharing. I'm going to share my screen, my presentation, and we will be good. So there is always a little bit of delay. I may get joined by my cat Holly, who is staring out the window in front of me. Bambi is by my side. He's had a little bit of fame. He's been in a few live videos, and now he just wants to, be live all the time. So it's a crazy world. Okay, brilliant. Here we go. So I'll just present that and check it's all okay, and then I can start. I think just keep looking at my phone, so I think it's okay. Looks like it's okay. Awesome. Okay, so welcome to Traveling Safely with Dogs, or cats actually, because my cat Paddington, before he passed away, used to travel all the time. So let's turn that off on Facebook. Okay, so Traveling Safely with Dogs. I'm going to tell you a bit about me and about my background. It is a bit of a minefield, this whole subject, and it's probably going to leave you with more questions. But what I want you to have the knowledge of is knowing the questions that you need to ask, okay, and the pros and cons. I'm going to be telling you the don'ts, give you a few things to think about. We're going to be looking at travel safe, crash safe, and within those two areas we're looking at harnesses and crates, and then we're going to look at post crash safety as well, and then just look at how it's a balance. And this is two of my dogs, Maz and Bambi, on the Isle of Mull, out for a little walk. We had a lovely time there and looking forward to going back. So a little bit about me. I have 6 dogs. You can see them there. Bambi's on wheels, rescue from Romania. Then I have Maz, who's a 2-legged dog from Afghanistan, the one in the top centre. Inca, my blind dog from Romania. And then there's Seren Spaniel, who's canicrossing with Inca there. She was her guide dog when we were doing canicross events, which hopefully we'll be back doing again. And then there's me, Rowan and Evie competing at, I think that was the New Forest, but I might be wrong. It was somewhere muddy. Anyway, I can tell you that. And canicross is my sport. Before I did canicross, I was really into flyball. So I've spent a lot of years traveling around in my what started off as a Land Rover with an awning out the back, and then graduated to a caravan, and now I have a camper van, and, you know, traveling with my dogs. So I work as an A&E doctor at a major trauma centre. We specialise in penetrating trauma. So that's anything that penetrates the body. So it might be a bullet, it might be a knife, it could be the steering wheel of a car. Before I became a doctor, I did 2 degrees, one in aerospace engineering and one in impact and explosion engineering. And they both covered a lot about, obviously, structural integrity of vehicles and buildings, as you can imagine, and also about sort of crash safety, and also looking at the body as well. And then particularly the impact and explosion engineering, we did a lot of sort of research into crash worthiness and explosion worthiness, because, you know, in some cases a crash is an explosion, and in some cases it's far more of an explosion as well. And so we looked at all those different factors. My dissertation for my master's was in the fluid and solid modelling of giant intracranial aneurysms, which is how I got interested in medicine. And I was trying to develop a code for a computer program that would predict rupture rates. That's sort of a bit about me. And prior to that, actually, when I was doing prior to my degrees, and when I was doing my aerospace engineering, I was also working as a flight attendant for Virgin Atlantic. So safety is something that I did that for 7 years. So safety is something that's been sort of in the forefront of my mind for a very, very long time. Okay, so it is a minefield. Air law, car safety, anything on the road is all very much retrospective. You know, we've all heard of cars being recalled because of faults being found. Laws are found, you know, laws are developed, highway codes being developed. It wasn't actually till the 50s that there was proper sort of investigation and data collection really into crash safety. And, you know, in the 30s, they felt that no one would survive a car accident, and certainly there was no, you know, safety features. Crash safety started off with using human cadavers, and then they did actually sadly go to animal experiments, and I think that went on till about the 90s. And pigs typically were anaesthetised and put in the front of cars because they could best replicate the human body. The problem with using anything like a cadaver or an animal that's anaesthetised, and also the dummies, is we are dynamic beings, and so we don't act the same, you know, and it only takes a slight variation to produce a really different effect, a catastrophic effect. These are sort of the crash test dummies. They've evolved over the years, different hybrids. They're, you know, started off with just sort of, you know, the movable limbs. They have sensors in them. They're very technical, but they do still obviously have their drawbacks, and they're constantly being developed as well. Now, you can't obviously plan for everything, and, you know, a dummy, excuse me, however amazing they are designed, they still can't sort of totally and utterly predict how a human will behave, because they're not a dynamic being. Now, we obviously, because of crash testing and because of what happens in real life, we have various safety features in our vehicles, but there's always risks and benefits associated with them. So I have seen quite bad injuries associated with a seatbelt, but I'm never going to tell you to not wear a seatbelt, because the chances of the risk of wearing a seatbelt is much smaller than the benefit to someone wearing a seatbelt. And it's the same with airbags. Airbags can cause problems, especially, I mean, this is why they say about airbags with children in the front, you've got to disable your airbag, because again, that can cause catastrophic injuries for your child, and the same with your dog as well. If you have them in the front with an airbag, you need to disable it. You know, and people do come in as well with burns from airbags and things like that, but they do still save lives. So it is always a balance of risk versus benefit. There's no, for dogs and safety, there is no standard, there is no independent testing. There are some facilities, but there is a pecuniary interest because companies have to pay to have their product tested. So there is always that element of, is it truly independent? And there's no standard. There are no anthropomorphic dogs like dummies. What they tend to do is use like a toy that's weighted down, but that does not behave in the same way that a dog would do. And when I've actually watched some of these crash tested videos, you know, the dog being flung forward in a crash, a dummy dog is not behaving the same way a dog would do. There's no movement of its neck, there's no movement of its limbs. So it's not, you know, what it can tell you is how far forward that dog will move, but it's not really accurate in telling you whether or not how, you know, that dog could potentially be injured by the harness or anything like that. And obviously, as we know, dogs come in all shapes and sizes. You know, something like a Dachshund, a long-backed dog, could behave very differently in a crash to something like a Labrador. And not just because of the size, but because of the actual sort of shape of their body. Now, as far as I know, sorry, I just have a drink of water. Now, as far as I know, there has been no testing of a dummy dog in a crate. And this, again, is a problem because we don't know how a dog would behave in a crate that was in a crash, how injured it would be. You know, it's not hard to imagine, you know, a car going at 50 miles an hour, hitting something, and then the dog being flung against the bars of the crate. How injured is that dog going to be? As far as I know, there's no tests. I did sort of do a good search of all the available information before I did this presentation. And again, I've come up with no information regarding that. Cars themselves come in all shapes and sizes as well, so it does make it really difficult. Harnesses are generally tested at approximately 30 miles an hour. You could argue that the risk of injury at that speed is significantly reduced, you know, certainly within humans. That's not to say it's not going to be, you know, there's not going to be big injuries, but, you know, there's no information. How is that harness going to cope at 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, 60, 70 on a motorway and a far higher generated impact than sort of tootling around town? Crates generally are for owners to fit themselves, which is a problem as well, because is the owner fitting them like the person who produced the crate, the developer, intended them to be fitted? It only takes a slight change in how they've tightened a bolt or a strap for that crate not to perform the way that it was tested. Crates themselves have only been tested at 40 or 50 miles an hour and generally only in one type of car. So again, that causes, you know, how would they perform in a car with less structural integrity? How would they perform at a greater speed? Any harness is only as good as its weakest link. So something ideally without buckles and good sort of stitching and made out of a good material. So there is a few harnesses that have like seatbelt material, but it's also again to do with the stitching and buckles. So I have a combination of harnesses that have buckles and you know, no buckles, and you know, I consider them really, really good. And bespoke crates, you know, how much investigation has been done into their crash safety? You know, when you put them into a vehicle, it does change. It can change how that vehicle responds in the event of a crash. You know, how qualified is the person who's done that bespoke crate in looking at impact and, you know, what happens in the event of a crash? So I'm not trying to disparage anyone who does bespoke crates, because there's some fantastic crates around, but these are just questions and things that arise. Okay, so the don'ts. Rule 57, when in a vehicle, make sure dogs or other animals are suitably restrained so they cannot distract you while you are driving or injure you or themselves. If you stop quickly, so, you know, that's really important, because in an impact, anything loose travels in the direction of the impact and it could act as a projectile, could injure you. Okay, and that's the same for any packaging or anything like that. So you have to always make sure you have things strapped down, and obviously they could injure themselves. A seatbelt, harness, pet carrier, dog cage or dog guard are ways of restraining animals in cars. Okay, so this newspaper cutting is about a dog that actually jumped out of a caravan window on the M6. So why on earth the dog was just left in the caravan for the travel, I do not know. But anyway, they never found the owner, and the dog actually got rehomed by someone who was probably a far better owner. But the reality of this is dogs do jump out of car windows, you know, and I've known dogs do it, you know, and I've gone tracking them. I've got a Springer Spaniel who tracks missing dogs. You know, the owner pulls up at traffic lights and the dog jumps out of a window. You know, a few months ago, I was traveling down to take the dogs out for a walk, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought the dog in the car in front was trying to escape, and because he had his like front paws on the side of the vehicle and the owner holding him, and I thought, oh my goodness. And then they got up to traffic lights and I thought, oh phew, they'd be able to restrain the dog back, you know, they should have had the dog strapped in anyway. And then I realized as they were stationary at the traffic lights that actually what they were doing was letting the dog do that, and a very Titanic kind of movement. And I was so shocked, because if I hadn't been shocked, I'd have got out there and just, you know, given them hell, because it was the most horrendously dangerous thing I've seen, to hold your dog out of the car so they can have the wind in their ears. Absolutely awful. And the saying goes, don't let your dog stick their head out of the window. You know, last week I saw a dog walker arrive to walk their dogs with dogs with their heads out the windows. It is so dangerous, because they can get grit in their eyes, and obviously it's also a risk that they can jump out. And, you know, even if they are restrained, they can still get hit by something as well. Now, ideally not in the front of a seat of the vehicle, because they can be a distraction to you, but also you've got the issue of the airbags. Now, in full disclosure, one of my dogs does travel in the front of my van. It's my boy Rowan. He can't cope. I tried a whole load of different harnesses. He can't cope with being in a crate. He's actually a danger to himself from injury. And there was the amount of times I was driving and he was all settled in the back, so I thought, and then literally it was like a scene from Allo Allo, showing my age now, with, you know, the British Airman, and him just popping up in the front seat with hello, and thinking, oh my goodness, and then I've got to pull over on the whole shoulder, get him secured again, and then travel off. So that's dangerous in itself, pulling over. So he sits up front, which he's very comfortable with. He's very calm. I have a diffuser in the front with, you know, I specialise in essential oils. So he's very calm with that. And I've got a dog in the back who actually gets a bit of travel sickness. So I have the different oil blends. So if you are someone who struggles with that as either a human or a dog, because I get travel sick, do get in touch, because I've got loads of remedies. But yeah, ideally not in the front seat, but it's in my van. It's a big bench seat. He's actually safer in there than he would be, I think, in the back of a car. And there's no airbags for the passengers either. So that's something you've got to consider, because obviously the airbags can injure you, and they could actually suffocate your dog. You've got the front one, you've got the side one. They can do burns. They could actually just, you know, quite injure your dog as well, because they're obviously not designed for dogs. They're designed for humans. No soft crates. No soft crates, and no collapsible crates. You know, I've got a crate in my lounge for my blind dog that's one of those lovely fold up crates, but not to travel in, you know, because they can fall in on themselves. Even if you cable tie them, they're still dangerous in a crash. And, you know, soft crates especially, they can just, you know, your dog's just not safe. They're going to get squished. You know, I see dogs all the time in boots, in crates or things, and, you know, that boot, if someone goes in the back of you, your dog's squished between the boot and the back seat. And so I hate seeing dogs in the back. I'd rather they were in the seats, you know. It's just, again, it's just such a dangerous position. And a partition isn't enough. So, you know, there's loads of places that sell these dog guards, but they're not fixed in very efficiently. I've got an old one from Halfords that I have in my old Land Rover that I've fixed it in differently, because it just wasn't secure. And I don't really, I mean, my Land Rover goes about 25 miles an hour, so it's less of a problem, but it's actually not there to secure the dogs. Primarily it was there actually for my rosettes, but when we used to do flyball, but it's actually not in a position that it's going to injure anything. But it, you know, they only prevent forward motion, and if you've got windows in the back of your vehicle, the dog can still get ejected out of that vehicle. It can still be, you know, they can still get out the boot. If the boot opens or emergency services open the boot, they can still get out. So they're actually not secured at all. And the dog gate can actually just come loose. Now, manufacturer fitted dog gates, that's different, because they're specifically designed for the vehicle and they're specifically bolted in. So that is different, but you've still got that issue at the back where you've still got that exit out the back door or the boot and the side windows. So, you know, it's really important that you recognize that. And, you know, like I said, these dog guards, I mean, my one before I fitted it in was very loose. If we'd had a high impact crash, it would have just come, you know, they're not secure at all. So it's really not, you know, they're really not a good idea. In fact, mine's so secured so well in, I can't even take it out, even if I wanted to. So, because I did a pretty good job fixing it in. But you know, that's not how it's not how it was designed to be fitted in. They're like those push pressure ones, fitments. So a few things to think about. Doors and windows get damaged and a scared dog will run. You know, I don't care what anyone says, you know, oh, my dog won't leave me. I've got dogs that have got really good proximity when we're out for a walk. I can't guarantee that they're not going to get spooked. You know, I've had it. I mean, my blind dog absolutely is completely devoted to me, if you know Inca. But if she gets spooked, I've had it a couple of times when we've been on a beach and she's been on a long line and something suddenly spooked her and she is off. And I'm having to run across the sand and rugby tackle, you know, kind of flying leap onto the end of the lead and pull her to a stop. You know, you can't say that a scared dog won't run and a scared dog will just stay with you, because it's not true, you know. And doors and windows do get damaged, and potentially they can get ejected from the vehicle. They can get you know, I see humans ejected from vehicles. I mean, I've had patients in that have been too large to fit in the CT scanner that have actually been ejected from a vehicle. So there's, you know, and that, you know, there's no reason that your little 20-kilogram dog is not going to get ejected from a vehicle in the event of a crash at sort of, you know, at 50 to 60, 70 miles an hour. So don't think that that won't happen. And then, of course, they can get potentially hit by cars. If they survive being ejected, they can then get hit by a car. And also emergency services may let dogs out. And again, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been in attendance of a casualty at, you know, it's coming from a crash and there's been a dog in the vehicle, dogs. And, you know, the paramedics are really upset because this dog's missing. And, you know, they were like, you know, we didn't know that we couldn't do anything. We had to get to the casualty. And, you know, it's something that didn't need to have happened. And the other flip side of it is a dog might be trying to protect you and be aggressive towards the people trying to help. And, you know, that in itself can cause a problem that could delay your care. It could involve, if, you know, in the case of a really aggressive dog, perhaps the dog needing to be shot or something like that, you know, if they're trying to save your life. So, you know, there's loads of reasons why you must secure your dogs, as, you know, for that reason. And just to go on to this picture, this is quite a sad one. So there was this motorhome that was broken down on the Harsh Shoulder carrying 12 show dogs, and a lorry ploughed into them. Now, the sad thing is that these show dogs, they survived the crash, but then 3 of them got loose, ran onto the motorway. Actually, I think 4 got loose and 3 ran onto the motorway and were killed instantly. And one of them was lost, but was later found. So, you know, this is a pretty devastating crash, as you can see from the pictures, but the dogs survived it and they got loose and then they were killed on the motorway. You know, what a waste. You know, absolutely, you know, a horrendous crash, absolutely horrendous. I always make sure you turn the gas off. And I was quite surprised, actually, when I got on a ferry to the Isle of Mull, and the guy loading the ferry went, "Is your gas off?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course," you know. And what I actually do is I bleed it out as well. So I will actually turn it off, then I turn my hob on to make sure there's nothing in the pipes. So, because I'm just like super cautious. And make sure you hydrate your dogs before journeys as well. You know, generally it depends on the dogs. For my 22-kilogram dog, I usually give about 250 mils of water a couple of hours before, and then it's like, you know, every half hour it might be, you know, 5 laps of water, and then make sure they've peed, because obviously traveling can dehydrate them, particularly if you have a dog. So Rowan can have a tendency to pant quite a lot because and Maz can, you know, because he can feel a bit nauseous. If I've got some great remedies for them now, but this was certainly the case before, and then they can get really, really thirsty. So really important that you hydrate them. And obviously you may need to break your journey as well, so you can do some pee stops and give them some more hydration. Make sure they've got a collar and a tag on, because again, if they get loose, you know, there's no ID on them. And obviously there is a lot of dog theft around as well. So it's important from that point of view that, you know, if they were missing and, you know, they've got a collar on and someone can reunite them with you rather than just, you know, someone pretending they're theirs or something. It is obviously all about risk versus benefit and a balancing act as to what the best option is for you and traveling. And that's what we'll be covering more about. Always have a fire extinguisher as well. You know, and again, just going back to risk versus benefit, all the information I give you, it will probably raise more questions. Have a fire extinguisher handy as well. I have one in the back, but I also have one in the front so that I can get one, because again, having a fire extinguisher could make a massive difference in, you know, your vehicle. You might be able to extinguish any particular fire, a small one, before it actually takes hold. So really important. So travel safe. So this is my beautiful boy Paddington. He used to travel everywhere with us to shows. He was blind and epileptic, and he was always at all our Canning Cross events, and he'd be out for a walk in my stroller. So he actually used to be harnessed in with the boys. I used to have him in a travel crate, but in actual fact, what I realised, which I'll explain later, in the event of an emergency and I had to get out, I wouldn't have been able to, it would have been too cumbersome. So I had him just with a harness. He's actually not, we obviously weren't travelling, and he isn't harnessed in at this moment in time because he's further forward, but you can see the little tether there. That's where he would be harnessed to, hanging at the back. So he'd have been much further back rather than just chilling on the step. But he was absolutely brilliant. He'd go everywhere. But basically they must be secure, you know, again, because you don't want them ejected, you don't want them going missing in the event of a crash, you don't want them roaming around the, you know, and potentially distracting you. And it must be safe for their need. You know, that's really, really important as well. I've got dogs with different needs. So I've got a blind dog, I've got a two-legged dog, and I've got a paraplegic dog. And so it has to be safe for their needs. And it has to be comfortable. I mean, Inca is on a bed on the floor rather than on the seats where the springers are, because, you know, she's blind, she can't see. So she's actually in an area with sort of my fridge and my toilet either side of her, so she feels really secure, and she's still comfortable. She can move around, and she's got a bowl there, but she knows exactly where everything is, and she can orientate herself really well. She's pretty cool, actually. And so you need to make sure that whatever you've got is suitable, and make sure it's comfortable as well, especially if you're doing some long journeys. You know, I have memory foam beds for the dogs, and for the springers they're on my seat, but for the disabled dogs they've all got memory foam. And then of my two boys that can be incontinent, they have towels underneath them as well to soak up anything, so they're not sitting in wet urine or anything like that, or poo. Make sure it's at the right temperature. You can get some really fancy, I have no bulkhead in my van, but if you've got bulkhead you can get some really fancy little thermometers that actually can tell you on your phone what the temperature is in the back. So they're not very expensive, they're available on Amazon, they're really good price. You might need to fit some fans. It's really easy to get fans to fit that just run over the 12 volt, you know, but again, you might need fans when it gets hot, but you also need to make sure that you're not overcooling your dogs as well. And obviously make sure your dog, if they're in a harness or anything, that they're able to move within reason. You don't want too much forward travel. My dogs can move probably about 20 centimeters, but they have, two of my dogs have like to turn around quite a lot. So I actually have climbing carabiners attached to how I tether them, which I'll explain about in a minute. But when they spit, they turn, it just turns with them, so they don't get all tangled, because otherwise their tether can get more tangled, and their seatbelt, their harness can get more tangled, so they can actually move. I only need it for two dogs, interestingly, the others don't bother. And they must be secured to an immovable vehicle structure. So I have harnesses, my dogs are tethered, and it's to proper tether points, and you know, so they can't move, and that's, you know, so that's really important. So because obviously in the event of a crash, you don't want that bit of, you don't want to have your dog all nicely secured, but then the bit that they're actually secured to actually comes out and maybe hits them and moves, and then they go flying through the window. Don't forget, any loads you have must be secure as well. So, I mean, a lot of us, you know, obviously we go camping, we probably have got quite a lot. And I mean, when I go, I've got my stroller in the back, and I've got Bambi's wheels, and then I've usually got my matting, but it's all secured down with cargo netting and carabiners, and you know, it's everything secure. So again, this is something that you need to consider when you're traveling, and it's not a case, you can't just wedge it in, it's got to be properly secured, because again, in the event of a crash, it can come loose. Crash safe. So these are the two dogs, they're not strapped in, we're not traveling, it's just a cute little picture of them. They're down route, we've had a nice little walk, and they're just curled up together. It's little Seren and Bambi, so cute. So crash safe, is it fit for purpose? Is it designed to be used in the event of a crash? So not your soft crates, not your collapsible crates, you know, what are your, you know, the harnesses, are they designed to be used in a crash? Who tested it? Was there independent testing, or did the company pay for it to be tested, which is generally the case? Info on the vehicle it was designed for. What vehicle was that crate really designed for? Because it's no good getting a crate that's absolutely superb, but it was actually designed for a bigger or a smaller vehicle than you've got, because it might not be, it fit properly. And it's the same for the harnesses and things like that. Is it a good fit for your dog? Is it a good fit for your car? because again, this all comes in. And have you got 2 or more exits into that, especially if it's a, you know, for a crate, or even just in the van. So in the van, I can get in at the rear door, although my stroller is there, but you know, I can climb over it and get in my side door, and I can get in the front because I've got no bulkhead. So I've got three exits. A crate, has it got a removable back so that if the back's caved in, you can still get your dogs out? You know, that's really important. You know, if you're in another kind of van, can you access the crates? I always remember someone telling me they were in an accident many years ago, and they couldn't get their dog out of the van, and I think there was a risk of fire, and she hurt her hip kicking the door open, but she managed to get in. And she said after that she always bought a van that had a door at the side and a door at the back. She'd never buy one with just one, you know, one entrance or an exit. So it's really important to consider that. Even if you just have a, you know, panel that you smash through, you've just got to have that chance. So there's Inca. She's on my little seat. This again, we're obviously not driving here. And Paddington again, and then Evelyn insisting that she can drive, but she's a Springer Spaniel. So there you go. So harness is what to look for. Nice Y-shaped harness. Because you don't want it restricting the shoulders for exactly the same reason people say Y-shaped harnesses for walking. It's exactly the same for traveling. You don't want it to be impacting on the shoulders, because in the event of a crash and then being restrained by the harness, it can cause injury. I mean, I see injuries from seatbelts anyway, but you know, it can literally just really be a problem. You want to have it so it's actually you know, nicely proportioned, particularly the breastplate as well, because again, you don't want it cutting into anything. Ideally with no fasteners, and you want a strap located close to the harness for the seatbelt to go through. So one harness that I really like, I actually have, has a long strap attached to the harness, and it has 2 loops. And I always put the seatbelt through the loop that is nearer the harness, so it's quite secure. So it actually can have a seatbelt through it. It's a nice harness. Then you can just actually sit them in. I actually really like the harness. But interestingly, it failed the crash testing, because when it was tested, the people testing it put the strap through the loop at the back of the end of the strap, so that the dog was able to travel far forward, far more than was desirable, and could fall right off the seat. But if they'd actually put it in the loop that was nearer the seatbelt, it's a brilliant harness. So, you know, and I don't know what the rationale was for that, because it's a brilliant harness, and it's a shame. Make sure it doesn't cross the shoulder joints, doesn't constrict the neck. So again, I was looking at a crash test of a harness, and I think I'm about to be joined by my cat Holly. I was looking at a crash test of a harness, and it was one that passed, to be honest. But when I actually watched the video, I think it was the most appalling one, because it absolutely throttles the dog there on the neck. And in my mind, you know, that's a huge fail. You know, that dog's probably going to end up with either strangulation or a potentially broken neck. But obviously this is on a dummy. But, you know, a dog that's got a neck that moves, even worse, you know, it's got a trachea, it can be, you know, throttled. Obviously make sure they don't chafe, because especially if they're traveling and you're traveling a lot, and you're traveling, you know, sometimes the competitions are quite far away, especially if you're like me, you go away a lot, you don't want it to be chafing. So, you know, it's not such an issue with furry dogs like I've got, but, you know, certainly with the finer dogs, you want to be aware. And always make sure you've got a D-ring to attach a lead to in the event of an incident where you have to exit the vehicle. I actually have some little handles attached to all my harnesses with a loop on, and they're just attached with a little clip. So I'll tell you about it in my evacuation thing. It's so I can loop a lead through them in an emergency. Okay, crates, what to look for. Not soft. I think I've probably laboured that quite a lot, and not collapsible. Okay, it's got to be a fixed structure. It's got to have an exit hatch. Has it been crash tested at speeds? So different speeds. So generally, when I was doing my research, they were all tested at like 40 or 50 miles an hour. And many of them were actually tested in a variety of collisions, but only in one vehicle. And they tend to test them in vehicles that have got great structural integrity anyway. So the question is, how is that crate going to hold up in a vehicle that doesn't have that same level of structural integrity? You know, that's really important to recognize. are they fixed into the vehicle by people who actually know the product rather than a DIY? Because again, changing and not strapping in a crate or not bolting it in correctly can actually change how it behaves in the event of crash. Some crates are also not tested in a vehicle. They're just dropped from height and they're smashed into walls. So you don't have that same information as to how it's behaved in a vehicle. And obviously it's not been tested with a dog in it either. And is it the right size crate for your dog? Too big is too risky. As well as being obviously too small, because there's lots of room for them to move. Now, this is the crate that Inca came over from Romania in, and I'm not, it's a beautiful setup, the company that uses it. It's a really lovely setup. They're really well cared for and very comfortable in there. And this is obviously a bespoke crate. It was really good. I had a good look around the vehicle. It was really nice. I just want to sort of make sure people are aware of that. But what I'm going to say is, playing devil's advocate, I can pick a lot of problems with this sort of setup. And this sort of setup is typical for a lot of transport, but also a lot of people who have dog sports and they have bespoke crates fitted. And the thing is as well, when you start fitting things to the structure of a vehicle, you start changing how it will behave in the event of a crash as well. So that's important to recognise, that you start changing and fitting something into what might be the crumple zone will affect that impact. Then that force is then going to be transferred somewhere else within the vehicle that may have catastrophic consequences. Okay, so obviously I am being devil's advocate, but I just want to point out a couple of things. So it has lovely little food and water bowls attached to the crate, which is absolutely lovely for the dog's comfort. But in the event of a crash, they are cable tied on, they're pretty secure, but in the event of crash, they could actually injure a dog, because the dog could be flung against them, they could get loose and injure the dog. The other thing is the bars of the crate. Muzzle width, dog easily could get their muzzle caught in the crate or their legs and be flung. You know, you can imagine in a crate, they're flung from side to side. They could easily break a leg by being stuck through the bars of the crate. And I'm not, you know, like I said, I just want to reiterate, I'm not picking this out as a real negative. I'm just saying these are some of the things that people need to be aware of what can happen. Post-crash safety. This is probably something that's not really looked at a lot. As I said, I was a flight attendant for 7 years, and one of the things flight attendants do a lot of, not just serving tea and coffee, we are very, very experienced in safety and emergency procedures. You know, we had, we have a training course, which I think it was 3 weeks at the beginning, just on safety and first aid and things like that, before we even get onto the tea and coffee. And then every year we have safety training, refreshers, like 3 days, where we just practice everything. We do emergency drills and everything like that. So we really, it's really honed into us and it becomes second nature. And this is really important, because in the event of a crash, certainly a fire, you've got 90 seconds to evacuate the whole plane. 90 seconds, that's all it is, because that's what's predicted it will take before a complete fire takes hold. Now, I was on a flight once back from Orlando where we got a warning light. It looked like we had an engine fire. We had to return back. We had to dump fuel out into the, about an hour away, and then return. And we didn't know if we had an engine fire or not. And so I remember landing, and it was a really, really heavy landing. And it was pitch black, and we're trundling down the runway at a huge speed, and you could feel the pilot trying to bring the aircraft to a halt, and just seeing all these fire trucks chasing you down the perimeter. And I was in upper class, and I've got the passengers opposite me going, are we on fire? Are we on fire? Because they can see all these fire trucks. And I just had to say, I don't know, because I didn't know, because of where you're sat on a 747, on the 200, for those of you plane geeks like me. But you couldn't see. And, all you're doing is you're waiting for the aircraft to come to a stop and hearing the emergency evacuation signal, which didn't actually come because we weren't on fire. But all that time that you're doing it, instead of you obviously you're concerned, it might be a bit of panic, but you're going through your emergency procedures. It's in your head. It's been drilled into you so much that when push comes to shove, what you're actually thinking of is what you're going to do, who you're going to get to help you, what the exit's like, you're going to get your door, who's going to, what passengers might need extra assistance, how you're going to get your passengers that are at the door to help you with that. And you're going through all the emergency situation in your head. And it means that you haven't got to panic when you actually come to a stop and you've got to evacuate. And that's the same thing you need to do for yourself in a car, is just have an idea. okay, because that can really make a massive difference. And this picture is actually of a crash. It was the rugby club fire that happened. It was a fireworks night, and the smoke all went across the motorway, and there was a big massive pile up because obviously people couldn't see. And I remember one story with a family in the car, and they had 2 dogs in the vehicle, and they got out, and their car was going to burst into flames because the car they'd gone into was on fire, and they had to get the dogs out, and they didn't have any leads, and they put their belts, and they were able to get the dogs out through the window before the car burst into flames. And it was just like, you know, it was terrifying listening to them speak. So always have a lead handy. And I have, like I said, I have these handles on the back of their travel harnesses. And my plan, and it's not the best plan, okay, it's not the best plan, but it's the one I've got. I constantly reevaluate, but I'm on my own. I've got 6 dogs, 3 of whom have got special needs, and I obviously used to have a cat as well. So I have the leads. I have Bambi in a pouch. It was going to be Bambi and Paddington, the cat, in a pouch. I've then got run a lead through these hooks on their harnesses. So that's the 4 dogs. I've got them all connected on a lead, and then Maz under my arm, who's a 2-legged dog, and then we get out. And it's the best I've come up with so far. But you know, it's just having that plan and having them on a lead, really important. So this really sad story was, it was a little dog, and it jumped back in the burning vehicle. I don't know whether it was trying to save the child. It's a really nice story, but when the paramedics found the firemen found the dog, I mean, the dog was literally very burnt and, you know, horrendously under the, I just hope he died of smoke inhalation first, but under the front seat of the car. But they'd got out, the dog had got out, the child had got out, and if they'd had the dog on a lead, the dog wouldn't have got back in the vehicle. So this is really important. You may think, why did it jump in a burning vehicle? Was it trying to save the child? Was it just trying to get to somewhere that it felt familiar? You know, so have a plan and constantly reevaluate your plan. I'm always reevaluating, thinking, you know, and the other day I had another idea of, you know, I could actually wear my canicross or my walking belt when I'm driving, so that I can actually just clip my leads on, and I've got hands free to then, you know, manage everything else. So it's just having this plan, you know, really important. And the other one I was thinking is having my a tether, you know, one of those screwing tethers. Easy access, not dangerous, so it's going to hurt the dogs, but easy access, so that I can actually get us onto the, you know, the embankment and put it in the earth and tether the dogs to it as well, in case I've got to get back into, you know, all these little ideas are important to have a plan. Okay, so some take homes for you. It is all about balance. It's about travel safe versus crash safe versus post crash safe, and interchangeable needs. So Rowan, he's in the front, and I'm happy with how he is there actually, but it was about, the most overwhelming concern with him was about being travel safe as opposed to crash safe. And then sometimes it's an interplay, because I didn't have crates put in my camper van, because at the time my camper van was done, I had a beautiful elderly dog, also disabled at that point, who was a sort of German Shepherd size, and I would not have been able to get her out of a crate quickly or easily, to be honest, in the event of a crash. So harnesses were the safest thing for them, and in actual fact it's worked out to be the safest thing for all the dogs, because I've got more disabled dogs now. But you know, so sometimes you have to, you know, think about how you're going to get the dogs out, and is whatever you're doing with your dogs during your journey going to be the safest option for that too. Secure your dogs, make sure they're secured while traveling, and if you leave the vehicle as well, have to get out of the vehicle, make sure you have your leads handy. And choose products that have had a basic level of testing and are reputable. Okay, really, really important. Do your research, look at how they've tested it, look at what vehicles they've had. You know, any company shouldn't mind you asking questions. Okay, they should welcome it, you know, and don't stint on the money. I mean, I know sometimes it does come back down to money, but you know, with like child seats, you have to have them, and it should really be the same for the dogs as well. So, you know, choose products that are good, and try and don't make it about the money. Use the best product for your vehicle and your dog's needs. Always have an evacuation plan. Okay, constantly reevaluate it. Okay, and think about what needs your dogs have. So that is the end. I'm just going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to come, hopefully we've stopped sharing and we're back in Facebook and you can see me. Thinking yes. So if you've got any questions. Hi, Becky. Yes, it's going to be live on my page. I will be keeping it on this page. It is not going to be missing anywhere. So it will stay here so you can share it. But like I said, I wanted to do this because I feel it's a really important topic for people to have, because I do see so much inaccurate information, and constantly people are saying, oh no, crates are the safest thing, and as I've said, not necessarily they are safer than harnesses. It really varies. So do ask questions. I will be checking, obviously, and I will answer any questions. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, it's all about the plan. I'm a planner. I like to, and I think as well, because I'm traveling on my own, I have to have a plan, because I've got 6 dogs, I've got 3 special needs, and even just if you break down, you must get your dogs out of the vehicle, because look at the story of that motorhome. They'd broken down and there was a crash, so you must get your dogs out of the vehicle, and ideally you'd be able to limp to a services or something, but it's not always possible. So I hope that's answered some questions. It's probably left you with more questions, but do just think about things, have a bit of a plan, think about how you can secure. There is always ways to secure your dogs and crates into something, even when you think you haven't got a secure point. There is always ways. An engineer will find a way to do it, and just secure your dogs and keep them safe. So thank you for watching. Do get in touch with any questions. Stay safe, stay well, enjoy your travels now that we're coming out of lockdown. I will still want to be cautious, and take care, everyone. Bye. Oh, hang on, I just missed these questions. Let's have a look. Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a I think you've just got to be really careful with what you did. I mean, I did loads of calculations with my tethers, and had a real geek out moment, and sort of had a real look. But certainly if you're using a harness that's got a strap attached, that's a proper one, that should be better. And I actually, because mine aren't in a seatbelt in the back, because they're on the seat, but they're fixed to the to the where they're actually on tether points that are fitted to the structure. Like I said, I have carabiners that are attached to them. But I mean, good climbing. I mean, someone who's good at knotting and good climbing rope is a good one if you're going to DIY. But obviously, my carabiners are all climbing strength carabiners, not the cheap ones. They're the proper. Sorry, it's Holly. Not the not anything fake. But yeah, it is, as you say. I usually work out between 20 to 30 centimeters to be able to move, and again, it does change. My smaller dog will have less because of how she's, her size. So you do have to take it on depending on the dog. So Bambi, the little dog, will have he has a shorter tether than Maz, because of his size and how they're fitted as well. But it's a difficult one. It is all about travel safe, and like I said, and comfort as well. Becky, I've created my video. If he's loose, yeah, I mean, I'd probably recommend, I mean, if he's in crates, it might be a bit too big for him. It's because, again, it's just about how much he can move around. I memean, there's the option of providing some padding on there might be beneficial. You could get perhaps bumper pads that you might have in a child's cot. You've just got to check that they're secure so they can't sort of suffocate him or anything like that. But it might be that you need to put a harness in there so he hasn't got so much room to move. And look at how it is. So I prefer less movement, but obviously still comfortable. My dogs can all have a fair amount of shifting around in their seat, but they're obviously still secure. So again, it's a bit of a judgment call. But yeah, you just got to think about, in the event of a crash, how much room is he going to be moving around in? Obviously a lot more than your crate. So a harness might, as well. I mean, have you got something attached to them as well in the event of an accident as well, so you can get them out and attach something to them? I mean, you shouldn't have anything in your crate that they could get caught on and strangle, and things like that. I mean, a harness is probably a better bet you know, if there is a risk like that. I can't think of anything that would be in a crate that would cause a problem. Unlike, you know, at home, my dogs don't have collars on at home. You know, a harness might be a better option, but you know, so I hope that's answered your questions. I will check back any other questions as well. So thank you. Oh yeah, they all travel with leads on. Brilliant. No, the only thing I'd say that's actually interesting you say that about the leads, and I had an experience. So after there was an incident a couple of years ago with I think it was Canicrossers, and their motorhome caught fire. And they had to get the dogs out, and they had all the leads and they were able to get out, and it panicked me. And that's probably why you keep leads on them as well, I imagine. And what actually happened, I got to the end of my journey, and one of my dogs, the dogs that spins, she'd spun so much, the lead had completely and utterly wrapped around her leg and was really tight. Fortunately, thank goodness, she was all right. So my dogs don't have leads when they're traveling because of that. But but I've only got 2 dogs. She's the one that has the swivel carabiner. Yeah. So if your dogs, as long as your dogs aren't spinny dogs like mine, nothing wrong with that at all. And again, it's all about safety from an evacuation. So yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. And a great idea. But not suitable for, you know, for mine. I mean, my blind dog can have a lead attached to her. My Seren Spaniel can have a lead attached to her, but my other 2 Springers can't, because they're the ones that shift around a lot. And again, I've had Rowan, he got caught on one particular occasion as well. He's the one who's just woofed with a lead when I'd not taken it off as well. So fortunately that was an even shorter journey, and you know, it was like 15 minutes, but that, you know, so yeah, so it's just, again, for people about keeping leads on your dogs, just something to bear in mind. Are they dogs that are going to move around and at risk of getting it caught around their legs or the neck? But you know, if they're not, then absolutely it's well worth doing. And the only caveat is that, you know, like I said, just make sure that they're safe doing it. But yeah, it's like I said, it is all about risk versus benefit. But I think for me, one of the scariest things is being in an accident where there's a fire or something and just having to get your dogs out. And again, it's you know, that really scared me when I heard about that, the couple that were in the motorhome crash, that, you know, their whole motorhome was on fire and they'd had to get the dogs out. And, you know, it was just like, wow, you know, scary, very scary. So if there's no more questions, yeah, so thanks very much for watching, and I will, like I said, I will check comments, so do feel free, if you're watching it on replay or anything, do feel free to comment and I will answer. Oh, thanks, Emma, hope it's helped. So hopefully it's oh, I think there's thunder starting now. Just heard my rabbit thump. Locking, oh, Becky, let's have a look. What about locking the boot or crates? Fire? Yeah, again, I live in the city, so I'm very worried about the doors being opened at traffic lights and things like that, and the dogs being, you know, for that reason. And again, I lock my doors. So if I'm traveling on a motorway, I actually turn off so I have the central locking, but once I'm driving, I turn it off, so it's not, the doors aren't locked, because it worries me, that particular reason. But certainly I agree. I think they, you know, again, it's a bit of a judgment call, bearing in mind where you live. We do occasionally get carjackings where I live, so I would, you know, everything would be locked for me. And you know, again, I mean, if your boot's locked, do you need to lock the crates? It's torrential rain here, sorry. Do you need to lock the crates as well while you're driving? So again, it's a bit of a judgment call, based on, you know, your individual circumstances, and sometimes it's about adaptation. I mean, if I'm driving around town, not that I do, you know, I will have it locked. If I'm going on a motorway, I just make sure everything's unlocked for that, you know, for that very reason. So it's pros and cons. unfortunately, there isn't a definitive answer, but you've raised a really good question. So hope that's all right. Ron will be all right in a minute. Honestly, it was bright sunshine and there's now thick clouds, so I need to go and get some calming oils in the diffuser and get them all settled. But do feel free to comment, and I will get back to and answer any questions. I'll just check there's no one else answering questions. So brilliant. I'll end it now. I'll go down to my barking dog who's terrified of the thunder, and take care, everyone. Stay safe and safe traveling. Take care. Bye.